expert panel. I am the tax man of, well, not tax man, I'm trying here to save you tax. So the anti-tax man, if you like. But I'm here with all my fellow members. So what we'll do on this live show is just do a little whip round of everyone that is on the show tonight. Normally we do a presentation, but I think this branding we have is so much better. So if you could just make your introductions, we'll go in order. So Teresa, why don't you make a start?
Hi everyone, good evening. Yes, I'm Teresa Kaczmarek. I'm here representing the National Residential Landlord Association. So any questions you've got with regard to your tenants or anything to do with rentals, then please do ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. Over to somebody else.
Tim.
Bronwen.
Okay, it's Bronwen Vearncombe here. I'm a property investor in Hampshire. I invest in HMOs, holiday lets, guest houses, developments. And the most important thing today is that I love to help people learn. And that's why I got this group together. Because not only are we experts in our own right, but we are all investors as well. So great to be here. Let's move on to Ross.
Good evening, everybody. Ross Maynard. I've been in construction for 35 years. Yeah, I know you can't believe that because I look so young, but it's true. I'm here to answer your construction or building problems, anything from our favourites in damp to environmental problems. Bring the questions in. We love them. Thank you.
Tim.
Yes, hello. I'm Tim.Bishop from Bishop. We're solicitors, and we're older than Ross. My firm goes back to 1831, which I think makes me the oldest member of the panel by a long shot. As well as being a solicitor, I'm an investor and developer. And as a law firm, we cover pretty much everything you'd expect. We have a specialist property investor team, specialist property litigators, and a specialist leasehold team. Over to anybody who's left. Simon, is it you?
Yeah, I think I'm still left to go. Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Simon. I'm from Funded Specialist Finance, commercial brokerage, so helping you find buy-to-let mortgages. I've been investing in property for over 20 years and very quickly learned a bit of knowledge, which is the kind of thing you could get from tonight. Soon meant that you had more knowledge than the average broker, and as an investor, you then need to go to a more specialist broker who understands what you're trying to do, which is why I'm here tonight. And
I think that's it. We're on the ball today, aren't we? We're so, we've got so many questions that have been asked in advance. We're all like, quick, let's ask the question.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the power of this technology that we have with us. And here we go. Look at this, team. This looks brilliant, huh? So Conrad has asked, can I purchase a buy-to-let before buying my own family home? Do you lose your first-time buyer's rights? What's the reasonable thing to do here? Houses in my area are quite expensive, but I can easily afford a buy-to-let in a cheaper area. So from a mortgage perspective, what should people think about when it comes to buy-to-lets and home mortgages when you're investing in property?
Yeah, okay, so whilst not exclusively, it's generally accepted by most buy-to-let lenders that will lend to a first-time investor and first-time house owner that they'll still probably treat the application on an affordability basis. So it can still mean that it's quite hard for you to get a property if you've not got enough income to demonstrate affordability. There are ways around that. You can find a project that needs a bit of refurb work and buy it using short-term finance, and then you become an experienced landlord. But in terms of, the main question is, should you do it before buying a resi? Well, that's really, I think, going to come down to financial planning, tax planning, which I guess is for you, Simon, is it not, in terms of planning out the tax journey for Conrad?
I think that is a fair point. So let's think about stamp duty land tax then, people. So stamp duty land tax, or SDLT, is the tax that you pay when you are buying property. The problem is if you buy a cheap buy-to-let property as your first home or first property, and then you buy a home that's more expensive, all of a sudden you'll pay the 3% SDLT higher rate. So just be a bit careful when it comes to that. Always a bit dangerous for that. Panel members, again, just remember your microphones are just on, just in case to cut down the background. That'd be fantastic. I'm going to, for the people that have registered before the event, who have asked questions, we are going to get to those questions tonight. So we'll go on to those questions and try and clear as much off as possible. If you are watching live, you'll see me looking down because I'm looking at the question sheets. But if you are live, then make sure you say hello to our panel members. Don't forget that if you look at below this video description, you will get the list, the contact details of all of our panel members. So make sure you look at that video description. And don't forget, of course, to press the subscribe channel as well. What I will now do is go to another question. So let's just go to, this is, I believe, this is from Laura. So let me get Laura's question. Here we go, bringing it now. So Laura's asked, what are the big questions you should ask when buying property here in the UK? What is a property inspection checklist? We are buying our first home, North East London. I previously, no, it's cut it off, so I'll read off the rest. It says here, I previously bought overseas, but not here. I know there are differences in the way things are done, so I want to make sure our bases are covered. Bronwen, it's probably easier for you to start that in terms of someone starting out in property. What's it like in the UK?
Yeah, great question, Laura. So I think if you've been buying abroad, you know, the key thing in this country is understanding the demand and building up a relationship with estate agents and understanding what's available in your specific area. Now, if you're looking for checklists, then, you know, that's perhaps a Ross question, you know, in terms of what should I be looking at. But if you've bought abroad, you know, you're going to be looking at the obvious expensive things like boiler, roof, windows, those sorts of things where you think, oh, you know, is there damp, that sort of thing. So, you know, that's really a Ross question. From my point of view, in terms of teaching people to invest, then it's really about the position of the vendor, because, you know, depending on their situation, you want to find motivated sellers if you can. And so understanding, do they need to sell quickly? Have they found their dream home already? Have they put it on at a massive price, so they're not really motivated? So all these sorts of things are things that I teach and that you can read about in my book and things. So more than happy to have a chat. But those are some of the obvious things. I'm sure some of the other panel members might have a couple of little nuggets as well to add.
Yes, can I come in there? Obviously, most people look at actually the physical state of the property, but it's well worth considering, particularly if you're not used to English law, is making sure that there are any title issues. By that, I mean the legal aspects of things. So question number one is, what do you want to do with the property? So, for example, if you want to let it out or you want to do serviced accommodation, you may find there are restrictions. The restriction may be, even in a house, sometimes there are restrictions on not letting to more than one family, which will create problems for serviced accommodation. Leases can obviously have many issues, many restrictions. You might not be allowed again to let out to more than one family. You might not be able to sublet at all sorts of things. So depending what you want to do, make sure whatever solicitor you get, you ask, can I actually do this? Don't assume, because there may well be restrictions on the lease or even on a house.
Can I just jump in as well and just suggest that at the end of the last session, we were all asked what we would have done differently in our sort of property investing career, and I suggested that don't go too big. If you don't know buildings, if you've never bought a property for investment, I'd strongly suggest the first one you look at is a fairly sound structure. You could catch a massive cold if you're not used to UK property with what you're going to find once it's been bought. Sorry, Simon. Do you want to jump in, Simon?
Do you know, I was just enjoying our really new format there, and Craig Sargent down in Chichester was just sending hello from sunny Chichester, and I was giving Craig a little wave.
It's a distraction, you know, this. We can see the chat, everybody, and normally we can't. So, you know, just bear with us a little bit. I'm sure Simon was going to talk about mortgage in principle and getting a really good mortgage broker in advance of going to view a property.
Absolutely. On the tip of my tongue, you took the words right out of my mouth there. Yeah, clearly making sure that you are ready to go, especially in today's hot market. a lot of estate agents won't even entertain what you've got to say to them unless you can prove that you've got funds. However, there's a real habit at the moment with estate agents asking you to get new decision in principles for every offer you make, which I absolutely do not agree with whatsoever. You will destroy your credit file and credit profile very swiftly. So reach out if that's something that you'd like to find a way around.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go to a different question then, guys, just so we can keep this momentum up, especially when we're using technology. You panel members, stop looking at the chat and focus. That's my job. Right, okay, so Adam has asked, how realistic do you think it is for a complete beginner to source funding via joint ventures or through other means? Is there even a good option for the first-time investor like me? Is it worth sticking it out and waiting for a few years? And it pretty much ends on that one to fund it myself. Again, just panel members, if you don't mind just muting yourself halfway as we're going through, that'd be fantastic. Bronwen, why don't you make a start in terms of answering this question? Obviously, we're talking about funding. Then we'll come over to you, Simon Hodgson, and Teresa. We'll come to you in terms of from your perspective with NRLA, but also if you have worked with joint ventures and what's your reservations about that. So Bronwen, let's kick off with you.
Yeah, this is a huge topic. So we will just précis things, because otherwise we could talk for 2 hours on the subject. I do have a webinar on this subject, so if anyone would like a copy of it, just let me know. Now, joint ventures, you share the profit, but you also share the loss. So a JV is massively, risky. So if you're a beginner, you've got to think about how do you check out the other party. So assuming you're a beginner, what are you bringing to that relationship? I assume it's money, okay, because it's not knowledge. so if you've got funds and a potential JV partner has experience and a lot of experience, then that can be a fantastic match. But you've got to do your due diligence, and a lot of due diligence, and you do need to make sure that there are exits and what happens if, and documentation and the rest of it. I usually say initially do a little loan first. It's safer. It's, think about the security. It's maybe testing a relationship out first of all before you go into something as complex as a JV. So anyone else want to add in their tips?
Yes, I think Bronwen makes a couple of very good points. There's no problem in theory doing a JV, but the two things: number one, make sure you have a properly recorded contract. Too many people get into bed together and they haven't really thought out the various things. So, for example, if you're setting up a company and it's with more than one person, you're probably going to need a bespoke shareholders agreement that sets out exactly the deal between you, who's responsible for what the exit plan is. The exit plans are important. Plan Bs, because I've seen too often that two people go into a joint venture together, go down the same direction, and then at one stage, one person's circumstances change. Perhaps they want to pull out, they want to sell, major problems. The other thing I think is really important, and it's something that everyone talks about and no one ever tells you, but I'm going to give you a free resource, and that's joint venture due diligence. Getting the right person is really important, and the problem is often people have no qualifications and you really take them entirely on what they say, and you really don't know who's out there. There are some very dangerous people out there, and often I've seen far too many people get into bed with someone else for a joint venture and end up with the wrong partner. So we have produced the only one, as far as I'm aware, of a free joint venture due diligence partner checklist. And I'll put that up, I think, if I'm able to put it up in the checklist. It's downloadable. So if you do find someone, don't just meet the first person you come along who's keen on property, really check them out. And even if you know them, you need to check them out in some more detail. So they're my two tips. Make sure you check them out to make sure any agreement is clearly recorded in writing with the shareholders agreement.
Just before I go on to Teresa, I'm just a bit worried about Tim's references to, getting into bed with other people and checking them out fully. So we'll revisit that question and that point of reference there, Tim, later on. Teresa, have you worked with joint venture partners? If so, how did it go? If not, why not? What's held you back?
No, I haven't worked with anybody on a joint venture. I am planning to in the future, so not something that I would rule out at all, because it is a way of stepping forward into something that basically perhaps you couldn't do on your own, with help with finance or expertise, for example. But I was just going to add, you know, what Tim said, that, you know, you do need to definitely sort out who is responsible for what, because, you know, when it comes to getting tenants in and setting up contracts, you need to decide, you know, who's going to have their name on the paperwork. But yes, I will be going into a joint venture in the future, no doubt.
Also, from a mortgage perspective, Simon Hodgson, what issues might you have if you're trying to buy a property with someone that you're getting into bed with, as Tim referenced it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously the main thing is that if you're both going to be on the mortgage paperwork, just remember that you've now created a financial association with this person, good and bad. So anything that might change in their circumstances could potentially have a knock-on effect with you. So I think a lot of JVs, as the guys have kind of pointed out, are really hard to sort of set up. So one of the things that I have seen work quite well, especially once you've got some education, and Bronwen's got some great education on JVs and how to set them up, etc. But also that education about finding deals. Now, if you can find a deal that's a refurbishment project, which means your JV is a short-term JV, if you can't do a loan agreement, you could potentially do a short-term JV to create some kind of property to flip for profit, and you then can kind of really get to know each other on a shorter-term basis. Because effectively, you know, a JV is a bit like picking a partner. It's a bit like a marriage, and things can change over 3 to 5 years. Your what you thought were aligned goals diverge just through natural progression and change. So that could be a great way of not getting into bed with somebody.
I'm quite astonished sitting here, I've got to be honest with you guys, for these references. If you are into an open relationship, then make sure you have many joint ventures, but always protect yourself in many different formats of legal. I'm talking about protection. Right, what I'll do is go to another question, because I think it's good to keep this momentum going. And to keep using this technology. So James has asked, I need some advice, guidance on stamp duty land tax liability on property I co-own with my parents, ITL, and I want to buy their share and add my partner. Now, SDLT, stamp duty land tax, purchase tax, call it what you will, but it's always based on consideration. So if your parents gift you a percentage share, then there would not be any stamp duty land tax, but you do need to speak to your mortgage broker. And indeed, if you're adding your partner, I'll let Simon talk about that actually. But from a tax perspective, you are going to be having a gift potentially. So there's no stamp duty land tax, but is there a capital gains tax? And that's something that your parents will have to calculate. Transfer between spouses, there are no capital gains tax. But talking about mortgages again, Simon, if someone wants to be gifted an element of the property from their parents to their children, what do you need to consider when it comes to buy-to-let mortgages?
It's usually quite a good idea to try and coincide that with a remortgage, and if you've got equity in the property, to do a capital raise, because you're going to have to redo the paperwork anyway. So why not kind of look for a new mortgage, get a better rate, etc., all at the same time? It's generally how I would approach something like that one. Because effectively, your parents have got to come off the mortgage deeds, and you've got to be fully on the mortgage deeds. That's probably all I would take into account. I think it shouldn't be any more difficult than that, unless you want to make it more.
Tim, do you have any thoughts about this in terms of transfers property between parents and children, and any legal issues that you can think of?
Nothing apart from the one you already mentioned, I think.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that short explanation. Let's go over to another question then. I think we're on fire at the minute. Please put us out. So Robbie has asked, our first property has fallen through. I'm so sorry to hear that, Robbie. It happens to us all. So it's something that you're going to have a few scars and protect yourself from that in the future. But it's fallen through because of post-valuation, the lender would not offer due to the property being part of a listed building. Okay, how could I have made sure this didn't happen? Obviously, this is a mortgage point then, Simon. So over to you, good self.
without wanting to state the obvious, gone to a different mortgage broker. That should have been picked up as part of the due diligence when the broker was going through the property, trying to work out what it was, what you were trying to do. Proper background research into the property would enable the broker to then approach the correct lender. That would appear to have not happened in this set of circumstances. And yeah, from my perspective, I want to find out, is it a listed building? Is it grade 1? Is it grade 2? Is it just the fascia? Are there any part of the internals that are listed? And present those facts to the lender up front so that we've covered it off. It's not ambiguous. We're not trying to, oh, well, let's see if it will sneak on through, or let's not check and not find out. Find out all the facts, present all the facts, and at that point, then the lender's got nowhere to go to if they have a change of heart. Because I then, as a broker, have got it in black and white via email from the lender. Yeah, you said you were all right with this. We're going to carry on, aren't we, Mr. or Mrs. Lender? Yep.
Okay. Very good. I'll move on. Let's go to another question. So Patrick has asked a couple of questions, and this is registered, but it was quite detailed, so I'm not going to be able to run through it on terms of its goal setting and so on like that. That's something that you, Patrick, and your business partner will have to really do. But one thing you did put on, which is quite generic and something that everyone can listen to and engage with, was will a combination of monthly dividend salary be the most tax efficient? Interesting enough on that point, Patrick, and partner for that matter, there are 3 effective ways that I think that people owning a limited company can extract money very tax efficiently indeed. And it's not just wages and dividends, which is what you might hear generically on YouTube or any other media. But there's a third: interest. Especially for private landlords that own a limited company that owns property. And the reason why I bring this up is because as a high rate taxpayer, you can earn £500 worth of interest tax-free. Sorry, £1,000 if it's high rate taxpayer, £1,000 if you're a basic rate taxpayer. So that's £1,000 as a basic rate taxpayer charged to your company, which you can earn tax-free. So that's worth it. And the reason why you can create this loaner relationship is simply because when you buy a property, let's keep the numbers really simple, £100,000, £75,000 mortgage means you've had to put in £25,000 as a loan to the limited company, and you can charge interest, typically about 6-8%. And so you do need to think about that. So I would, but the element of taking any money out of a limited company is case by case specific. So you can get the interest tax-free, like I said, you can get £2,000 worth of tax-free dividends each person, not for all your company, for all your companies combined, not just per company. So you do need to get some good tax advice on that one. It's not something that I would say is relevant to your case specifically, and it doesn't give a generic answer to answer everyone. My point here is that you need to work with your tax advisor to get the very best solution in place. So I'm just going to go to some of the other questions that we have. And this is from Tiffany. So I'm going to share this as a question. Let's see if this works. And then I will, for those that are watching live, I will be coming to your questions in a second. So fear not, I will be there. Tiffany's asked a question. Do you know who are the best to contact if we want to help with social housing, and our charities good to contact as well? Let's start with that. Bronwen, I know that you've done some social housing, haven't you, in the past? And maybe Tim, you've had some involvement too. So let's go to you, Bronwen, first, and then over to Tim.
Yes, it's a very topical subject the last couple of years. I provide a short-term accommodation for councils, emergency housing, some street homeless. So it's short-term accommodation primarily, but I do have some really good contacts around social housing. So I would direct you to something called the Supported Living Gateway, I think it's called. I made a note actually. Yeah, Supported Living Gateway. It's run by a lady called Lisa Brown. I'll put a link to Simon so we can put it into the chat box. That's where I would go and do some research, because they've set up a business a couple of years ago trying to link charities with housing, with investors and property people. So that's a really good place to go do some investigation primarily. Tim, did you
Yeah.
have some?
Yeah, I can help. To be honest, pretty much the same as you. And we know those guys. If I only spoke to them about 2 weeks ago, and we've had a few conversations with them, we do a few of the legal aspect of this. And as a result of which, we are going to be, I think, we're planning to be one of their recommended providers for legal services, legal advice. But it's not actually Lisa anymore. Lisa's kind of moved on, and there's a new guy. But if anybody wants to have a contact to introduce to them, I'm more than happy to do so. Just contact me. I'll put my email on the link. Come back to me, and I'm happy to introduce you to them. But yeah, they're as you say, Bronwen, they're a middleman between people who want to do this kind of work, landlords who want to provide this kind of service, and a series of not just charities but various numerous bodies who actually need landlords. And then we come in because we provide specialist legal contracts, because they're a bit unusual, these contracts. But yeah, absolutely, that's the way to go.
Perfect. Well, what I've done for you guys is I've put the link right there so you can see it on the screen, but it's also in the chat box. So make sure that you click on that link and away you go. I did. Sorry, Teresa, go on.
I wasn't sure if I just about put my hand up would be okay. Yeah, I just wanted to add that all the local authorities across England, they all have like different housing issues. So all of them have different schemes set up. So some are offering schemes for landlords to, to house people, social housing people. So yeah, try your local authority as well. That was just another tip.
Another golden nugget, hashtag stealing from Ross over there. Right. Okay, so let's get to another question. So David, good evening. David has asked a question. This is a YouTube live question. So if you do have questions, feel free to bombard us here, and hopefully we'll get through them. Good evening, panel. Good evening. Back. I'm applying for a mortgage after purchasing with a bridge loan, BRRR, single let. Do I need a solicitor? If so, why? Before we go over to Tim on that point, Simon, talk us through the process. Obviously, this particular person, David, here is bought a property using bridge finance. Why would he use bridge finance? And then moving over to a buy-to-let. So why don't you kick us off with that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, obviously, David's done the right thing here. So it would appear he's bought a property that requires some refurbishment and maybe some reconfiguration. So rather than putting it on a buy-to-let mortgage with which you're supposed to rent it out from day one and prove that you've got money coming in to pass affordability stress tests, you buy using a bridge. Now, you would then, once you finish the project, it's now ready, hopefully you've added value. And the idea then would be to momentum invest, which is the BRRRR. Keeps going on forever and ever. And recycle your cash. Answering more precisely David's point, does he need a solicitor? Yes, unless he's gone to one of the few bridging lenders out there that will do what they call a bridge to let product. So you have a lender that does both the bridging and the buy to let product, and the solicitor kind of is there for the whole journey, and that they can then effectively kind of operate on both sides. Otherwise, yes, you do require for normal remortgage off bridge onto a mortgage, a different solicitor to kind of step in and do that job.
For those who are beginners, BRR we covered in the last month's session, and I have a recording of that. So if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, buy, refurbish, refinance, that sort of thing, I can send you a copy of that recording.
Just to say yes, as Simon's already indicated, you'll definitely need a solicitor unless they're very exceptional circumstances, not least because the mortgage company is going to want to do a full title check, because they would need to know what they're actually buying into, effectively what they're lending you, and setting up the charge. So yes, you'll need a solicitor, and yes, we do it all the time.
Okay, let's get into this question then. This is back to you, Mr. Get into bed with partners, Tim. It says here, I've got some mixed bridge property. Now, actually, before I've gone into that, I jumped the gun because it was meant to go to another question, but I'll keep with this then. I might not come to you, Tim, after all. It says here, Simon, I've bought mixed-use properties via a limited company. I'm hosting the flats upstairs, holiday let via Airbnb. The shops downstairs are going to be rented out as retailers. I'm not sure what the other question is on that, apart from what it says there. So And it continues, does it? Should I set up a limited company for the holiday lets? Okay, so there's another question part there. Here we go. I think we just finished it off. So should you set up another limited company for holiday lets? There is a tax implication of normal investments and holiday lets. And can you guess what it is? No? Value-added tax. Okay, so value-added tax, if your holiday lets goes over £85,000, then you will have VAT to charge 20% to your short-term guests. And that's a bit of a nightmare, because now all of a sudden your competitiveness may not be there, but you've also got an accounting issue as well. So what I tend to say to people to make it easy for you is to separate your limited companies for holiday lets, which are considered to be trade, as well as your investments. Do that at all costs if you can. I'm going to go to the question I thought I was going to go to, and that is this one. So this is what I wanted to bring up for you there, Tim, but my technology failed me, or I failed technology, more honestly. Ben has asked, if I've got a limited company, I'm a co-director of it's insolvent, as in no wrongful trading, what is the impact on finance or other limited companies in the future? Now, just on that point, and maybe we'll come over to Simon Hodgson as well on this point. But Tim, is there any issues when you have company directors getting involved with each other? Then you've got this whole issue of someone doing something legally incorrect. Now, they're not saying that here, clearly. But are there any ways to protect yourself from a liability when you're getting with a joint venture partner?
Well, the way to limit liability, of course, is a limited company. Just for those of you who don't understand, if you're going to get into bed, I'm going to use the phrase again, with someone, there are three ways of doing it legally. You set up a limited company, which obviously limits your liability. So in theory, unless you've been fraudulent trading, you should have limited liability there, so they can't necessarily go after your house. Then there's what's called a limited liability partnership, which is similar to a limited company, but a little bit different. I won't bore you with that. And the third type is a partnership. And just so anyone is aware, if you go into business with anybody, regardless of what you intended to do, if you don't have any paperwork at all, that's a partnership. And it's controlled by the Partnership Act 1890. So there are your three options. In terms of limited liability, therefore, it's a limited liability company. That's going to be the best you're going to limit. But you are always at risk if someone else goes pear-shaped. As far as the finance issue, I'd say the first thing I'd always do is ask Simon. That's, I think, a finance issue. But the only thing you can do to limit liability is a limited company.
And Simon Hodgson, people getting involved whereby someone could be insolvent or have credit issues, how might you protect yourself from that situation?
Okay, so I think there are a number of things that aren't completely clear from the question that Ben asks. So he's joint director of a company that is insolvent. So what we need to understand is, has the company taken out borrowing, and if so, for what? And it has, or is that going to be paid off? It's not impossible to get funding and finance if you are of this position. And again, it depends on how far down the line and how things have gone. Ben, you definitely need to take some legal advice, but I would suggest that it might be worth, and I say might because this definitely isn't advice, resigning as director to remove yourself from the implication if you are not at fault. And as I say, definitely not advice. You do need to take some legal advice. That would, in terms of funding and finance moving forward, certainly help me present your case to other lenders, because it doesn't necessarily, you aren't necessarily having done something wrong. So the company could, for no other reason, we are in very uncertain times. You could have struggled through COVID, etc., and done a really great job to try and keep things moving, but finally realised it's just not going to work. So that's that. I think those are the main ways that you could protect yourself that I can think of off the bat without knowing more things about the actual circumstances, Ben. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us, either PM one of us, or yeah.
Well, what I would do is I'm going to go to a different question. So this is from Lisa, I believe. Lisa, it's hard to find good deals as a beginner. Now that's an interesting thing, because I'm not sure, good deals are hard to find. I think sometimes it's about how you go about good deals. I'll come on to Bronwen for that. Should I buy off-plan deals and use sources? So Bronwen, and then moving over to Teresa. So what's your thoughts about using property sources? Are they good value for money? Are there ways to find deals yourself? So let's start with you, Bronwen, then over to Teresa.
Yeah, so first of all, you do need to get educated. You need to get some knowledge. And that's by doing some sort of course. Maybe my online program might be useful, you know, so that you can speak the language. That's really important. And then, you know, look over people's shoulders, go and meet people, you know, start to understand how this all works. You can use a sourcer, but again, you need to have the knowledge to know what questions to ask a sourcer. There's a lot of out there who have done sourcing courses and they're trying to make their money just by finding good deals, and they're not actually experienced themselves. So be very, very careful. But yeah, I don't think it's difficult to find great deals. I think the market is hard, but there are deals out there. And I know that because I'm seeing them. You just need to know what to look for, how to build relationships, how to try to find motivated sellers. And that definitely starts with education. So have a chat with me. I can point you in the right direction.
Teresa.
All right, yeah. So it's not really with my NRLA hat on it. I suppose from speaking personally, when I was out looking for property, you know, you have to have a plan. And as Bronwen said, you have to know, you know, what you're doing, what you're looking for, and you have to all out go for it and just totally focus on that one thing that you're looking for and just relentlessly just keep at it. I know that when I set my intention on that basis, it took me 3 months, 100 houses later, and I absolutely landed on exactly the deal that I wanted. It does happen. So I would say that, you know, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But I think if you've got the right education and you've got a plan and you focus on it and you go for it diligently, then you're bound to succeed.
Perfect. Good answers. Let's move on. Bhavesh has asked a question. Now, Bhavesh asked a question previously to this, but I want to share this element of it, whereby he was talking about, can you have a loan if you've got multiple limited companies? Can you simply make loans between one limited company and another? And the answer to that is yes. But then he's led on to, do you need to set up a group structure with a holding company to transfer 500k in the most tax efficient way? And the way you can do this is simply this: is you could have two companies and you could loan money from one to the other and then repay it over time. Now, if you're a trade business and you want to do this loan to an investment business, you have to be careful with some of the tax consequences of doing so, such as entrepreneurs relief and business asset disposal relief, as it's now called. And on death, you might have business asset rollover if it's a trade business, as in you're selling services or products. That way is going to be tax efficient. But as soon as you make loans from that company that's deemed to be a trade, where you get all these nice tax reliefs, entrepreneurs relief, business asset disposal relief, etc. But then you make loans from that company to another. All of a sudden, that becomes an investment, and all of those tax reliefs that we just talked about could be scuppered. And that's where a holding company structure might work, because this company can transfer money up in the form of dividends to the mothership and then money back down again to the investment company. That sounds quite complex. And the reason why I'm saying in that simple triangle is, as much as I want to try and make this simplified on a YouTube video, it's not going to work. So I would always make sure that you speak to your tax advisors and understand what you are trying to achieve, because it's a real difficulty to get that right, and you can make some very costly mistakes, not just corporation tax in the year, but also if you look to sell that business on as well. So that's probably not answered it, but I think in many ways it's meant to be a precursor for you to go and get some tax advice on group structures. Quite complex, pay for the advice, get it right. So let's go over to another question. This is Paul's asked, how do I find the best area to invest? And are there some apps available to me? And I know that panel members, you spoke about this off air, but Bronwen, do you want to make a lead on to this one first, and then other panel members jump in afterwards?
Yes, I have a module around, how to look and research areas, but there are many more apps available than when I first started. But one of my favorites is Home Track. That's because I'm familiar with it. But I'm sure other panel members have got their little favorite areas as well. So hometrack.com, I'll put the link in the chat box. That's something I look at and enjoy looking at, apart from obviously the right moves and doing your own analysis. Anyone else got a view? Hands up.
A very obvious one, really, and I'm sure this has been said 1,000 times before, but if you're looking for areas to invest, the place to start is places you know and know well. There's a great risk that people think, oh, actually, if I've lived in the south of England, the southwest, say, for example, but I'm told that Hull's really good, or Skelmersdale, or somewhere nowhere near you at all. There are risks there. You don't know the area, and that can make a big difference. But also, you don't have the local contacts. If you go somewhere nearby where you live, if you want to get to know the estate agents, you can pop in and see them on a regular basis. You can drop them off some cakes at Christmas or whatever, and just develop those local relationships. It's much harder to do that if you're doing it 300 miles away. Plus, if you end up managing something yourself or have to do some building work or maintenance, or you actually want to run the property yourself, again, if you're 300 miles away, an absolute nightmare. So often, depending where you live, of course, often the first place to look is a place somewhere within half an hour's drive of home.
Perfect. Good question. Good questions and great answers. Hopefully, Teresa, you're back in. Go on then, Teresa.
Yeah, just quickly, the NRLA, we do invest in research. So we do conduct research across the country, and we have areas where we basically summarise, how many landlords are selling, how many are buying, what the average rents, and things like that. So, that's another good tool just to look at, areas to invest in as well.
I think Bronwen's doing Ghost in the Shell impersonations over there with our background. Some great questions. I'm going to go to another question. Again, this is from someone who registered previously. So let me just go over to that. This is from Rosie. It says here, what's happening to lending rates, and what's the pros and cons of borrowing in joint names versus limited company? And to be honest, I think, Rosie, again, from a tax perspective, the differences between limited company and personal is very specific to you. So do get some tax advice on that. It's not something that we could just rattle off for something that's really going to be useful for you, to be fair. No generic answer does, in all honesty. But from a lending capacity, what is going on with interest rates? And interesting enough, before you start that point, Simon, I did hear from the Americans that they're purposely increasing interest rates because inflation is so high. So the interest rates are now beginning to try and counter that inflationary rate, and then maybe trying to force themselves into a recession. I don't want to use the word R, but it's on the horizon. What is interest rates likely to be in the future from your perspective? And what's the difference between sole name and limited companies?
Wow, what a big question and topic there, Simon. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Fed over in the United States have stated very openly that they are happy to carry on raising rates and fight inflation very aggressively, much to the fear of lots of investors over there. I believe the housing markets are starting to slow down and stall a little bit because of the fears of how that might affect things. And for homeowners, home mortgages over there have got nearly twice as expensive in terms of interest rates through the period of interest rate rises they've done thus far. However, back here in the across the pond on our little island, it's not been quite as bad. Certainly, the Bank of England don't look to be quite as aggressive in terms of their interest rate changes, and they're nothing like as open as the Fed is. The Fed has tried to give some sort of idea of how they might raise rates to try and calm the markets. Over here, we tend to go for smaller rises with less sight of what is going to come across the way. Markets are priced in potentially, as I understand it, and these are very, very loose numbers here. We could see sort of base rates to around about 1.25 to maybe 1.5 by the end of the year, but that is very, very tentatively based on how the numbers come out. If inflation does sort of slow up or show that we've topped out and got to the peak, that is definitely going to give the Bank of England, the free rein to slow down raising rates, because raising rates too high too quickly will have a negative effect and possibly put us into recession. In terms of what's happening to lending rates right at the moment, they're changing quite rapidly at the moment. So the interbank swap rates are how generally banks borrow money to lend out, unless they are a crowdfunding platform, and those have been sort of changing quite rapidly at the moment. And the gap between borrowing in your own name and limited companies has got a little bit smaller. It used to be around about 1%. In some circumstances, it's now between 0.65 and 0.75. But yeah, you will need to reach out to someone like Simon to talk about limited companies, V's, personal names, because it's quite a complex set of scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about at length about you might cost you more on interest rates, but if it saves you tax, then that's worth doing. And you've got the role reversal as well, haven't you?
Absolutely.
Let's go over to a different question now. And this is from Pat. I'm just going to move my microphone away from me. It's getting too noisy. So this is from, let's have a look, see this comes up. Yes, I don't actually quite understand this question, to be fair, but I'm going to leave this over to maybe Tim and to Teresa just to bail me out with the answer. Good evening, panel. Does it require an application to be a member of AML to be fit and proper person? And why does some council with statutory declaration endorsed by a solicitor? Does anyone know what that means?
I don't know what AML means. I do know about
money laundering normally, which is kind of, are you getting money from criminal activities? But I'm not sure. Maybe is that a banking thing, Simon, more than it is anything else?
I was on mute there for a second, and I was just rushing to get the button to unmute myself. Yeah, in terms of that acronym to me, shouts anti-money laundering. So does it require an applicant to be a member of AML to be a fit and proper person?
So I believe that they are talking about a licence application with the council. So the council will do a fit and proper check. You don't have to be a member of anything. They will do a DBS check, so disclosure and barring service, I think it's called. So basically, they're just checking to see, is there any sort of criminal activity logged against your name? They'll be looking to see if you've breached any license conditions for, any previous licenses that you may have held. So yeah, that's what I've got to. So I'm assuming it's just.
Yes, it is. Yeah, Pat said on the chat it's for an HMO license application.
So you don't need to be a member of anything. You would just apply for the license, and then they would do a check to see if you were a fit and proper person, which would involve, the DBS check and various other checks on you.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Pat, for clarifying that for us.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go to a different question set. This is, and this is from about a property development. So Ross, you're on cue now because you've been a bit quiet and I'm a bit worried about you. So I wanted to purposely a question for you. As you can see here, I'm currently buying a 3-bed rectangular shaped building and considering expanding it to the first floor. It does continue, so I've just got to find that. It says here, continuing, which would you recommend? A prefab roof, double glazed end, with 4 bedrooms within, or expand the smaller existing roof, 4-sided roof? Oh, that's a challenge, isn't it? It's a bit of a Krypton factor, this is.
Give me some clues. I mean, if it depends on the roof tiles, what it's going to look like, what your footings are like, what the walls are like. There's so many other questions I'd need to ask. Maybe it's easy just to get in touch direct and maybe send me some photos. I might be able to give you some more advice. I'd be reluctant to say too much. I mean, prefabricated roof, yeah, always the best way to go in terms of speed, program, etc. Getting it up there. Expand the smaller existing roof, 4 sides of roof. Doesn't make any sense to do that. But again, you know, I'm talking blind. I'd have to look at the building itself, or at least an outline of it, see what you're trying to achieve, and then maybe be able to help you with that. So again, I'll get Simon to put my email address in the chat. Maybe get in touch with me directly, and I'll see what I can do.
Those details are already in the video chat box already, guys. So if you do want Ross's details, go to the video description. I'm going to keep on with Ross. And that's into, yes, there you go. He's been very excited, people. If before the panel started, he was pretty excited. He was like, this is a PG video now. I've just turned this into. So over to you. Oh, cool. Look, he's so desperate.
Yeah, nuggets of gold coming. Nuggets of gold coming. I can feel it. But what's really good is that if you ask these questions in advance, it does give me a bit of opportunity to do some background checks because I want to give you the right information. So spray foam insulation. If you haven't seen it, it literally sprays traditionally in between roof joists on the inside to give you insulation. Which is great, and you can put it in between the joists of your roof. That's not quite so common, and I'd be hesitant to recommend that. The first thing to say is not to try it yourself. When I was going through my checks earlier, I actually came across a kit on Amazon that they're advertising, so you could do it yourself. I'd definitely not recommend that. On the negatives, the RICS, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, do suggest that some mortgage lenders, and Simon can help us out with it if he's ever come across it, will downvalue potentially your property because it's fitted. It has issues with on the back of the roof joist particularly, but the felt's good and strong because if you ever want to get it off, you're in for a hell of a challenge. It also, when they get down to the bottom, I'm going to go into too much detail, but your roof needs to breathe. You need to have airflow through your roof to stop condensation. And some lesser contractors will block that airway off. There is a national association of, well, it comes under the National Insulation Association, which I'll put the address in the chat in a minute. So there is a regulatory body, if you like. Be really careful who you use if you're looking at using it. So I'm not going to jump in on your job here because as of the 1st of April this year, there was zero rated VAT coming in on certain energy saving materials. And I can quote you the VAT notice, which is 708/6. That would be for your contractor.
It wasn't an April Fool, was it?
No, it wasn't. No, it's absolutely true. So would I recommend it? Again, you'd need to see the type of roof it's on. If it's a new house, yeah, potentially it's fine. If it's an older house, you'd need to check what your roof felt's like. Get some really good advice. Go on that NIA-UK.org, which is the National Insulation Association. Get some advice from them. Always make sure he's a recommended or a registered contractor because it can end up in a real mess. Would it reduce my EPCs? Anything that's going to give better insulation will help to reduce EPCs. Again, you know, specifically to depend on the type of house, where it is, the facing, the elevations of it, north, south, east, west. Would it reduce your EPCs is a difficult question. Again, by all means, get in touch. I'll be happy to give you some more advice if I can. Simon.
Yeah, on that notice of EPC, Steve, if you Google EPC register and go to the very first thing that comes up, which is the .gov website, put in the postcode of the property, and then it will bring you up all the EPCs for that particular postcode. Find the number of house that is your house, and at the bottom of the EPC, it will then tell you all the things that you can do to improve the EPC, and it will touch upon insulation, whether that's roof, loft, floor, etc., etc. And that will give you the answer, or should give the answer, as to the type of insulation and how it will affect and impact the EPC.
Perfect. Well done, guys. Well done. I am going to go to a different question here. So let me just go here. This is another one for Ross to be very excited about. Dry rot versus wet rot. I mean, the conversation, guys, that we have after the panel member, when you don't get Ross excited by talk about asbestos either. You're just speak. Oof.
That's
Oh,
great fun.
oh, excitement. So let's talk about dry rot versus wet rot. What can you do about it, Ross?
What can you do? So, okay, first of all is get yourself a very, very good specialist. There are some smaller companies who are excellent around. I use a small company myself. Get them out, get them to look at it. I could sit here for a few days, and Simon loves it when I do this, talking about these topics. Actions, my only advice would be to get a specialist out and check it, because again, without looking at it, you're not going to know unless you are a specialist. Sometimes I can't identify it, and I will just bring my specialist in. I can't comment on cost ranges because, again, you know, it depends on what you need, what the property is, where it is, how bad it is, etc. On a positive note, most of the times you find dry rot or wet rot, it isn't that costly to cut it out and repair it. But again, you need to treat the rest of the timbers to make sure they're not infested as well. So a specialist is my answer to that. I'm sorry I can't be more specific, but I could talk about it for hours. Bronwen, did you?
Yeah, I've done exactly that, and in fact, it ended up being rising damp, which is actually a bigger problem. However, you know, again, getting the specialist out doesn't cost you anything initially, so you've got nothing to lose. You really need to get to the bottom of it and understand exactly what it is, and what the potential treatment options are. Yeah, like everything, like this expert panel, you know, use an expert, because there's no point in just trying to cover it up, because it's not going to get any better unless you deal with it, my experience.
Very good, very good. Let's move on to a different question then, guys. Let's move over to Jane here. Jane's asked a question. Hi all, I can't purchase a block of flats for both freehold leasehold under my personal name. Thank you. Tim, I've always been curious about this whole thing about if you buy a building, you can't have freehold and leasehold. I know that's the case, but why is that the case? Why can't you be a freehold and leasehold in the same name?
The principle is very simple. You can't grant a lease to yourself. That's behind it all. So there is a way around that, and that's to make sure you have it in another legal entity. So, for example, if I own a block of flats, actually I do, I could grant myself a lease, not to myself, I could grant it to my wife. I could grant it to a company I set up. So there is a way around it, but you can't actually. So if a company, for example, can't grant itself a lease, I can't grant myself a lease. So it's got to be an independent legal entity. So any other company, any other person, or even combination of people. So that's the way around that. So the answer is very simple. Yes, you can own a block of flats in your personal name or a lease, but you can't do both at the same time. Simple as that.
Very good, very good. So there you are. So let's get to another question. This is again someone from live. I will go to the questions that have been pre-asked before the session, but I will just end with this one for now. Hi, invested in a new build, supposedly 15% below market value, with the aim of selling after 2 years ownership. Once true market value should be achieved. This completion was Q1 2021. They continue. After delays, it should now complete Q4 2022. Now, I'm looking to keep the property. Should I transfer to a limited company before completion? I mean, the issue you have, if the property is already in your name, it depends. Has the deal been done? Because my understanding, Tim, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you go through an exchange, the deal's not done. Is it possible to change the owner from your individual name to a limited company upon completion, or is the exchange pretty much there and not done?
The answer is very simple to that one. I don't know. I've never been a conveyancer myself, and it's one of those things I haven't come across. I don't know. I'm sure all my conveyancers would know, but unfortunately they're not here. You've only got me tonight. So the answer is I don't know, but if only once the answer. My email's been there. Email me. I'll ask one of the team, but I don't know.
Yeah. I think from that side of things, though, if you have the property in your name, transferring it to a limited company just because you want to keep it may not be the right thing to do. And the reason for that is because you will now have capital gains tax liabilities. You will also have stamp duty land tax. So do plan this one very, very carefully, because I do see people that make very costly mistakes with this side of things. So, yeah, in round terms, I think there are opportunities, but I think you'll be burdened with so much tax that it would make this whole solution go away and wouldn't be worthwhile. I'm going to another question now. Paul has asked, what documents do I need? And before I actually start this thing, there was 90 odd people watching this live, and only 9 people have pressed the like button. So panel members, let's go on strike, because it's not worth it, is it, this show? So if you have not pressed that like button, come on guys, give me a help here. We're trying to do a live show. This is free. Pressing that like button, is that difficult? Come on. So press that like button, that'd be fantastic. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Share this. One person in your mind do you know this show would be great for? There must be one person. Just think what name pops into your mind, and then send the link and then send it to that person straight away. Okay, do that for us. That'd be fantastic. Okay, so I lost myself now. So Simon, answer the question. What documents do I need to have ready for a mortgage in principle? There you go.
Okay. Right. I'm going to make an assumption that this person's employed. So generally what a broker would normally ask for are a copy of photo ID, a proof of address, 3 months worth of personal bank statements, 3 months worth of income proof in the form of pay slips. And that should then be and also then the broker's fact find completed and filled out. And that should be enough then for the broker to be able to go off and generate a decision in principle for you if it's so required by the estate agent. Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Anything that people need to do from a legal perspective, Tim?
You're on mute.
I'm just thinking. Oh, hang on, I lost you. Hang on. I'm not sure. I'm not being a conveyancer. I'm not entirely sure. Clearly, there's any issue to do with identification. So obviously, you're going to need to make sure your solicitor knows about identity. But they're the real issues, I guess. I
would say look at your credit file. That doesn't cost you anything. So just check that there isn't anything that you don't expect to see in that, and that's easy. You can do that yourself because there will be credit checks involved, won't there?
I'm absolutely sorry, Brian. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, a copy of your credit file as well. Do beg your pardon.
Perfect. Let's get to another question. This is from BT. Let's hope it's not British Telecom asking this question. So, is there a way to get a buy-to-let mortgage to pay for a lease extension for a flat with just 50 years remaining? Let's go to you first, Simon, but then over to you, Tim, in terms of what this person could do with a 50-year-old lease.
Right. The answer is yes. However, it will really depend on how the deal's structured. And Tim's probably going to cover this, so I don't want to steal too much of what Tim's going to say. Yeah, there's a section stroke clause of the lease extension procedure, which is number 42, if I remember rightly. And as long as the current leaseholder has triggered that, you can then negotiate with the freeholder, the lease extension cost. And as long as there's an uplift from that lease extension payment, I can get you bridging lending to cover up to 100% of the purchase price and 100% of the lease extension cost, as long as you've added enough value.
Splendid. Thank you for not stealing my thunder. And the advantage of this is, in theory, although there are costs involved with the lease extension, in theory, the profit you make, or rather the increase in capital value, should more than outweigh all the costs, the premium, etc., etc. The government introduced that because the theory was what they didn't want to do is, having got everyone to buy property in the first place, didn't want those leases to expire and suddenly people had nothing left. So therefore, they've made it attractive for people to extend the lease. Now, in terms of extending your lease, there are 2 ways to do it. There's an informal version where you can agree with your freeholder. That can work, can be quicker, but there are a lot of risks there. And this is not what Simon's talking about. Simon's talking about a formal or statutory lease application, lease extension application, under what's called the Section 42 procedure. Now, what happens here, you have to have owned the property for 2 years. So provided the vendor has owned the property for 2 years, they can put the application in, no cost to them, just literally an application, a Section 42 notice, and then on completion, transfer the benefit of that across to you. That means you don't have to wait for 2 years. You can crack on with the lease extension. So that's what Simon's referring to. So that's the way to do it. Make sure the vendor has owned the property for 2 years. And if it's a probate property, they should still be able to do it. and then make sure the vendor puts the application in, and then transfer it over completion, and Simon can help you. It's worth pointing out, my law firm has a leasehold team, and we're probably the biggest and most specialist lease extension team in the country. We've helped something like 10,000 people extend their leases or buy their freeholds, and it's a bit complex. Always happy to give advice on the subject. And one thing we do is when we act for conveyancing for people buying the situation, we always make sure we take over the Section 42 application ourselves, frankly, because it's specialist and a lot of conveyancers get it wrong. So what we do is we actually provide the application, we pass it over to the solicitors, we give them a guarantee we'll cover any mistake if they make, and they put in the application, but we're prepared it. So that's what you need to do. It's a lease extension, and it should make you money. And for 50 years, you need to do it sooner rather than later, because at this stage, the premium you pay, that's the cost, will be going up for two reasons. Firstly, it depends on the value of your flat, and in a rising market, a flat's worth more, so you're paying more. And secondly, your lease is getting shorter every day. So basically, you have a double whammy. So my suggestion is do it as soon as possible.
Perfect. I'm going to stay with you, actually, Tim, on this one, because it says here, Pete has asked, if I'm renting a flat I own to a friend, do I need a contract? So what's your thoughts on risks associated with renting to friends?
Well, I think, do you need a lease? This is perhaps more something that Teresa could have dealt with, because I know the National Association are very good at those kind of ASTs. But yeah, you do. I think the critical thing is whenever you get into any legal arrangement whatsoever, it's always important to have it in writing. And I think a lot of people forget that. If you don't have a formal lease, then it's unclear actually, is it a lease? Is it a license? What are the circumstances? And things even with friends can fall through. So the answer is very simply, yes, I would definitely get a lease.
And apologies from Teresa. She did tell us she only had an hour, and time flies. So she's had to fly off, I'm afraid. However, the NRLA website is a really good place to go to for some basic information about contracts and ASTs and all that. Really good place to search for some of the basics.
I'm just going to a question here from Tiffany. It says, if you create a limited company for property, then what's the point you start taking money out from the company if you work full time? Great question. No idea. That really is depending on your lifestyle, doesn't it? Do you need the money? Yes, take it out. You just need to do it in a tax efficient way. If you don't need the money, don't take it out. I can't really answer more succinct than that, unfortunately. I'm going to go to a question that has been asked by someone prior to this event today. Dan asks, if I'm refurbing a house and it's empty, do I need to still pay council tax? Do you know what? I wonder sometimes that there's no right or wrong answer here, because I'm sure that different local authorities have different powers. So Bronwen, do you want to come on to that one? Because you probably have some insights.
Yes, I've certainly done this. I've refurbed a lot of houses in my time, and there's nothing worse than having those expenses whilst you're doing it. So the best thing to do is to go onto the council website, have a little look. If you're not sure, you might be lucky and get hold of somebody on the phone. But certainly Southampton, Portsmouth, Winchester, where I invest, have been really helpful. And usually what we've got is up to 3 months. And then you just let them know what's going on. The one thing you really must make sure about is your insurance. And I'm sure Simon will pop in there as well and, make sure the mortgage company knows what you're doing. But in terms of answering the question, you don't have to pay council tax for a period of time, and it will vary. So just check. Yeah.
Anything on that one, Simon?
No, I think Bronwen covered it quite well there. Yeah, don't forget, if you are carrying out major refurbishment works to your property, that you probably shouldn't have a buy-to-let mortgage on it. If you do, you need to reach out to the lender and ask them for permission to carry out any major works, just so that they are on side and on board with it.
And Simon, just to add that if the refurb, or if you're buying a house that's been empty for 2 years, you can get a reduced VAT on that as well. Sorry to jump in on your tax things, but as a builder, not many people know that, and it's one of the ways you can actually secure a job if they don't. So, but as investors, you should know that if the house has been empty for more than 2 years, it's 5% VAT, I believe. Simon, is that correct?
It is correct, absolutely. Yeah. Good point. Well put there, Ross. another nuggets of gold from tax. So if you need to get some tax advice, please do reach out to Ross. He'll be your man. Let's go over to another one. This is a question that's been posted before. If you have long questions, by the way, the text box will go crazy and probably won't be able to accept it. So just be a bit mindful that we may not be able to get your questions answered if it's really detailed in length. So let's just go over to Lorna's question here. I'm just going to go over. So let's have a look. Here she is. It starts off saying, we are in conveyancing for a Victorian semi that looks like it's had a bit of brick movement between the front bay window and bedroom and the soldier course above back window. Continuing, so because it's a bit lengthy, she continues to say, here it goes. We will be planning to have a building survey done. We are hoping it's just superficial and nothing more structural is required. What's your thoughts on that one before we go to any questions that you may already answer?
Is that me, Simon?
Yeah.
Okay, so a classic with the bay window is older buildings, Victorian type buildings. The bay window was actually structural, and a lot of times you get UPVC windows put in that aren't necessarily structural unless somebody's picked it up. So if you look at a majority of probably 50s, 60s properties with the big tiled bay window, and you see some movement, it's because the window below has been replaced. It has either hasn't been supported properly when it was replaced, or the window isn't structural. Ways to tell that sometimes is open the window. If it binds, it means the frame's compressing, which is a really easy way to find out. Take yourself a spirit level. Put the spirit level on there. You might find the bay's actually pulling away from the front of the house, which sounds quite serious. It's not the end of the world. It's not a huge job, but it's a job that needs to be done. Soldier course, which for anybody that doesn't know is a brick stood on its end, and you traditionally see them in older houses above windows and more modern houses. Again, the reason they slip is because the previous window was load bearing, it was supporting that brick. The replacement windows haven't got that support, or they haven't thought about that when they've changed the windows, so the brick slipped. Superficial, yes. Structural on the bay, always. The windows, the rear window with the soldier course is probably easier to repair. Sometimes they put in a catnick across it. That's a reinforcing bit of steel that goes in the cavity. It's just really, again, really difficult to answer the question without seeing it. But they would be my first two ports of call to look at.
Yeah, I think some of the question that Lorna's asking is, if it does turn out to be structural, would you renegotiate the price? Absolutely, you would.
Oh, yes.
So I've had this very situation a couple of times, actually. One I pulled out, and the other one I negotiated. I tried to negotiate the first one. But, in terms of your survey, it does need to be a structural surveyor that comes out, not a general surveyor, because they may not, understand, I think. Yeah.
Bronwen, just jumping on that point, and sorry, I've read the question again now before I went off into my spiel about bay windows. A building surveyor will only say to you, that looks structural, go and get a structural engineer's report. For me, a structural engineer's report is somewhere between £200 and £400. You can find good structural engineers locally. There's a lot of smaller guys that do it. Just check their insurance, make sure they are who they say they are, and get them out, get them to do the structural report, because it's if you don't get the full survey done and the mortgage company's happy, then you can use that as your negotiating tool when you're talking about cost and price.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's answered that. Let's get into some more other questions, because I think there's plenty still to try and get through, but so I don't think we're going to get all of it. So just going to go to this question from Sue. Sue's asked a question here. Let me just get that. Here we are. Here she comes. Sue has asked, I'm thinking about buying a third house on a buy-to-let mortgage. Now, this is an interesting next section because everyone keeps talking about it, and I'm sure perception eventually will force us into reality. Is that a safe option now that's given we might be heading into a recession? At least it says might, not we are. I would have liked to make a start on HMOs, but I think it might be off the table for a couple of reasons, and I think years, due to energy crisis. So there's a couple of things here. Bronwen, why don't you jump in, because obviously people are going to talk about this R word, recession, and to be honest, we are going to do a sequence of events of what is recession, how do we know we're in recession. So I will be doing some short videos on that subject on this channel, so be warned on that one. But Bronwen, from your perspective, I mean, even if we are heading into a recession, is it all doom and gloom, and what's your thoughts?
Well, no, I mean, as a sort of professional property investor, you know that there's a demand out there for rental. So the key is, even if there is a little recession and there might be some reduction in value, it's not going to be huge in my opinion. But at the end of the day, when you're investing and you're looking to buy, you work out what the return on investment is at the price that you want to pay for it. And as long as you don't have to sell it, you know, you've got to buy for the long term. So recession doesn't really matter. If you're holding for the long term, prices tend to increase anyway. So it's really the ROI that you need to be focusing on, and not worrying too much about whether the price might dip a little bit for a period of time. That's my view. In terms of HMOs, you know, again, it's a complex strategy, and yes, you do generally include bills, including utilities. Now, what we've been doing is managing that by fixing those utility prices way ahead, if you can. And they are going to go up again in October. So again, it's worth fixing. Let me know if you need to contact someone who can help you with that. So yeah, you've just got to manage it. It's like any of the strategies out there. You know, you've got pros and cons, issues to resolve at the time. But through these sorts of events and talking to experts, you can go, right, how do I manage that? We've increased our rents, as a lot of people have as well. That's not unexpected. And yeah, you manage the energy efficiency as best you can. That's my view. Anyone else got a view on that?
Yeah. Can I come in on that? Can I do an experiment, Simon? Can I try to share the screen? Is that possible? I've got a button. Is that possible, Simon? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're not keen, are you? No. Okay, fine.
Technology.
No, it's not working anyway, so ignore that. What I was going to say, however, there was some research, and I was about to even show you the actual picture, but actually the number of 18 to 30-year-olds in the country, in the UK, is significantly increasing. The thing I got from The Economist actually showed, compared with the rest of Europe, there's a massive hike in the next 10-15 years of 18 to 30-year-olds. It really is quite significant. And that's important because my understanding is that a significant number of people looking for HMOs are in that 18 to 13 age group. So in other words, it's quite rare when actually the area you're targeting, actually, you know, there's going to be a huge increase. Because I think it's fair to say the average 18-year-old is not going to be able to buy a property. So therefore, I think, although there are short-term issues like costs of utilities, actually as a general strategy, it's got a lot of attraction. And the standard law of economics is supply and demand. So if there's an increased demand and the supply isn't increasing, it may well be prices going up. So I certainly have an HMO. I'm not considering doing anything daft with it. I'm going to keep going. And I think probably in the next 10 to 15 years, there will be an increased need for HMOs. There we go. Boring old man's rant over.
Simon, can I just jump in very quickly? Only to say that a lot of people, I work with HMO landlords nearly every day of my life in my refurbishment and maintenance business. A lot of them go in and they don't have enough profit to start off with. So when these issues are coming up, I'm seeing more and more struggle at the moment. For me, and Bronwen, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I used to go in with HMOs that I had on a room and a half was my profit. And that always gave me a margin. If one room was empty, I still had some profit left. I'm not seeing that on some of, particularly rent to renters. It seems to be a big issue. So it's just a point worth making. I think that, you know, make sure your profit's there in the beginning, because it won't be there at the end if the way we're going at the moment.
Yeah,
Bronwen, did you want to add to that?
No, I mean, yeah, you've just got to be knowledgeable, get a really good education and understand how do you work this out in advance so that you've got that contingency and you've done your homework. So yes, there is demand. You've just got to find your niche and you've got to work out those numbers. And I'm not a fan of rent to rent, I must admit, because you don't end up owning the asset anyway. So your margin's got to be massive, in my opinion, if you're doing anything like rent to rent. That's for another time, maybe.
Yeah. Let's go over to another question. So it's, hi all, for a cash buyer property that I want to turn into a holiday let, are there any legal aspects that I need to be aware of that could restrict the use as such, other than in London, which we all know, not we all know, but in London there are real badly restrictions to prevent you from using property as holiday lets. But from a mortgage perspective, if someone's bought a property, it says here cash buyer, so that's not an issue. But if they do want to finance it in the future, are there any issues of converting a normal property into a furnished holiday let, Simon?
No, in general, there aren't really. I think the main thing that would probably come up, and Tim will kind of concede or confirm this, is if you've got a leasehold flat, it's very common to have in the terms of the lease that you are not allowed to do short-term letting. But if it's a freehold property, then yeah, generally getting a serviced accommodations for a holiday let mortgage on that should offer no particular challenges.
Tim, any thought from you?
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned this earlier on, that there are two aspects to it, and it applies with houses as well as flats. First of all, look on the title, because there may be restrictions on what you can and can't do. Certainly some areas where if the houses weren't owned by an estate, there's a restricted covenant on there and you can't do various things. For example, one common one which was in place in the 1920s and 30s, it's come back a bit in the last 10 years, is you can only rent it to one family. So that's an issue. But in terms of the lease, there are often a whole load more things. You need to have a look at your lease. I think it's the best bit of advice for anyone who ever buys a leasehold property. Very simple. Read your lease. If you don't understand the lease, make sure you get a solicitor who explains in language you can understand. If you still don't understand, ask them again and again and again till you get the right answer. But there are all sorts of clauses in leases. You might not be able to rent out at all. You might be able to rent out to one family. You might restrict some short-term letting, all sorts of things. So you need to make sure whatever you want to do, you can legally do before you buy a property.
Great one. Let's go to a different question. We're going to try and do the last couple of questions because, would you believe it, it is already nearly 8:30. So if I was you, I wouldn't try and type in your questions because we just won't get around to them, unfortunately, guys. But it's a very popular show. What can I say? You know. So the question is from Belbear: how can I stop ET asking for mortgage in principle before viewing the properties? Don't go to Mars. Is definitely something I would say. But Simon, what's your thoughts on mortgage principles and estate agents?
Okay, I guess the first port of call would be, get your broker to gather all the information. Yeah, make sure that you are fully mortgageable, and then send you a confirmation email back saying that such and such. I've assessed and checked that so-and-so is completely fully proceedable and mortgage ready. We have a decision in principle that we can show you if you are happy to confirm that the offer that they put forward is acceptable to your buyer. Something like that. Sorry, your seller, I should say.
No, that's okay. Moving on to a different question. So Sheila has asked, I have a buy-to-let property in Salford where the service charge has increased from 760 to 2,400 this year. And she goes on to another point of the question, but she finishes off to say, what is my recourse? I guess, Tim, if you've got a freeholder who's charging you big rates, is there a challenge to that freeholder?
I think there are probably four things you can do here. Probably the best is not necessarily the easiest, and it will involve work with other people, and that's coming together to jointly buy your freehold. Again, going back to lease extensions, as I was saying earlier on, if you get together with enough people in your block, you have the right to buy the freehold from the freeholder, whether they like it or not. Not so much a problem if you've got perhaps a maisonette or four flats in a small unit. Sometimes when you've got 150 in a block, getting them all, enough people on board, over half, can be quite tricky. So number one, freehold purchase is a possibility, but there is a cost. Everyone will have to stump up cash to buy the freehold. But that's the best one because you own the freehold, therefore you have complete control. The second best is the right to manage. Again, if enough of you get together, you can take over the right to manage. So you're responsible for managing the block, although you don't own the freehold. So the freeholder can't do anything about it. Again, you have a legal right. Again, harder to get if you've got a large number of people in a block. But the easier thing with right to manage compared with freehold purchase is with the right to manage, you don't need to pay a premium. There aren't those costs involved. That's number two. Thirdly, there's a third one you can do. Now, you don't need anybody else to do this. It's pretty unusual, and we've only come across it once, I think. It's really unusual. Most people don't know about it. You can apply for what's called a court-appointed property manager. Now, the difference with this and right to manage and freehold purchase is with right to manage and freehold purchase, no error is responsible. So you don't have to prove that freehold did a dodgy job or hasn't been maintaining the building. Not necessary. With a court-appointed property manager, you do need to prove that the freeholder has been at fault. But the advantage is you can make that application on your own. And what they do, they appoint a third-party managing agent. It's pretty unusual, but is an alternative. And lastly, there are ways sometimes of challenging individual service charges, but that can be difficult. Sometimes if they're major works, really expensive stuff, it's more possible. Again, I've got litigators who get involved with that. So they're your 4 choices. Each has advantages and disadvantages and limitations. But certainly the ideal one, if you can manage, is freehold purchase, buying the block, the freehold of your block, in which case you'll all own the freehold, also known as enfranchisement. And needless to say, my lease extension team do that on a daily basis.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much for that. There was a question that I want to get to, and this element. This may be useful for Simon to answer. Let's see if it comes across. Yes. So, hi, please. How long does it take in months to buy, repair, and remortgage to pull out equity? Many thanks. And I guess that's a leading question. Maybe that's something Bronwen can go into as well, and Ross for that matter, because it's not just a case of just plucking numbers out of there and just saying, well, that's it then, off you go. But why don't we start with you, Simon, in terms of doing what is the buy, refurb, refinance strategy in this case, and how long does it take to get the finance in place? And then maybe between Bronwen and Ross, we'll talk about the issues of this question.
Got it. Okay. In terms of how long does it take to do that, there are no restrictions. There are certain lenders out there that won't allow you to do a remortgage inside of 6 months, and then there are lenders that will allow you to do it inside of 6 months, but only go to 75% of what you can prove you've spent. So the trick is to find a lender that will allow you to go to 75% of open market value or full market value, so that you can fully recycle the cash. And as I've kind of stated there in half the answer, it's as quick as you can complete on the property, complete the works, and I can get the remortgage through and complete for you, etc., etc. However, refurbing isn't necessarily as quick as you might think. Sometimes it can overshoot that 6 month term, and I'm sure Bronwen and Ross are going to cover that in detail.
Shall I go next, Bronwen?
Yes, not in huge detail because we don't have much time left.
So very quickly, whatever the repair estimate, the refurbishment estimate is, make sure you've got a big contingency. I always use 20%. Make sure the program is comfortable, and I would suggest whatever the builder tells you, you extend by 20% as well. That will give you a rough time scale because things change in building. Sorry, Bronwen, that's me done.
Yeah, it's really hard. I think the strategy is really hard in the south. Because property prices are so high. So trying to get below market value, significantly below market value, to give you that contingency and that opportunity is very, very difficult. But I know lots of people doing it up in Birmingham and further north, where you can pick up properties a lot cheaper, and so you've got more flexibility. That's my view. But I do have experts in this strategy, so if you do want to learn more about this strategy, I can put you in touch with them. Okay.
Perfect. Well, I think that has to conclude because we've got 2 minutes left. So I think it's been a fantastic episode. And I have to be honest, panel members, there have been some amazing questions. There's been a lot of questions. So if we haven't got round to your questions, I apologize, but there's only so much we could do. We could rush through them, but then where's the value in that? Because the answers will be quick and rushed. So apologies, but hopefully you've got some great value out of this session. And don't forget to press that like button, share this this channel so that other people can benefit from it as well. Think about that one person. Now, just on panel members, I have to be honest with you. The 4th of July is obviously a very important day for Americans, and I'm in America. So I won't be able to do the 4th. So I'm thinking, can the panel members do the 11th of July instead?
Yeah,
for our next live session.
It's my birthday on the 4th of July, so I probably won't be on it.
So you won't be on the 4th. So we'll do the 11th.
let's do the 11th. So May the 4th be with you is not going to be a date for us. We will do the 11th of July at 7 p.m. So I wanted to just say that now because I want to make sure that you are live watching us know when the next session is. Bronwen, why don't you, I'll just get rid of the question set now, but why don't you take us away with your feedback on tonight's session?
Yeah, and of course the 11th is 4 weeks because of the bank holidays. It's been a bit all over the place, so don't worry, everybody. You know, you will get emails from us. You will get information about when the next session is, but put it in your diary. It will be on the 11th. So yes, thank you to the panel members for their continued support. We are all experts in our own right, and we are also property investors. And that's my advice to people who are in this game, really, or learning about this game, is always work with experts who also understand how to invest, because you get a double whammy. You get experience as well as expertise. So that's why we do what we do. We love what we do, and we love to support people and add value. So if there is anybody watching that needs a bit of education, there's a link that Simon's put into the chat box, which is my online program of learning. I've also got a book, so that's also in the chat box. You have to put it in front of you, Ross. It's called Building Your Dream Life, 15 real life examples, all the problems, all the damp issues we've had and how we overcame those issues. So yeah, by all means, have a little look at that. And if you want to talk to me again, it's easy to find me on social media. Always happy to have a chat. So yes, thank you very much for all your brilliant questions. We will do our best. If you can ask those questions again, we'll do our best to answer those early in the next session so you don't miss out. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much for coming along, and we'll see you all on the 11th of July. Bye for now.
Then bye.
Bye-bye.